Hello, friends. Welcome to the Creative Thoughts podcast. I'm going to start off with apologies, and then I'm going to go straight into the meat of this podcast. So, first of all, apologies. I am going to do this episode. It's going to come out every Friday, but today's is a special one. First of all, happy of many New Years. My New Year's resolution this year of 2026 is to lose weight. I'm not going to the gym today because A, it's miserable. B, I'm sort of feeling a bit rubbish. I'm having a day off from the gym. I'm getting back into it tomorrow. I'm doing all the rest of it. There's loads of stuff I need to do. I'm doing loads of productive stuff. And I thought I'll do this podcast. I'll sit down and do this podcast. Because really, doing this podcast doesn't really take much unless I put a script to it, and then it does take a bit more. And I was going to do a podcast script anyways, but I thought, doing this topic, really, I don't really need a podcast script. But I feel now that I've set a podcast up on here, and I think everybody has really been asking. I've had so many questions over the past few months from people about, how to, the business, whole business thing, even the pretend business. How do you go? How do you do this? How do you do that? How do you, all that kind of thing. So, yeah. So, anyways, but I am thinking about, get all this done and all the rest of it. So, in each episode of each Creative Thoughts, I'm answering questions as I go. And because I think that's what you've got to do, isn't it? So I'm not going to focus on AI or anything answering those questions, because I think, and people have got a rough idea, of how much, AI is really destroying so many industries. But AI will only destroy if you let it. You've got to remember, there are 3 laws of robotics. And a robot can only command what you tell it to do. AI is literally, yes, it's taken from algorithms and all the information it knows, but its main thing is what you type into it. If you type into, say, ChatGPT, for instance, something harmful, it will give you something harmful. Because that's what you've programmed it to do. You're putting in the prompt, blah, 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 and it's giving you back. Now, if you want to do something productive, I'm not saying it'll be 100% right, but if you want to do something productive, like, give me a list of what I need to do today, yada, 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 give me a list of 12 things I need to do so I can do them and get them done, and draft this, that, and the other, blah, blah, yeah, no, all really good things for you, because it has to be you for you. And then what you do is you take it to, you then say, right, this is a list that I've given AI. It's given me this list. What do you think of this list? What do you think I need to do? Do you think I need to recreate the list? So it's something that you can do. It's giving you, the thing with AI is it gives you the bones of something. It doesn't necessarily give you the skin on the bones. It gives you the bones. It's like, back in the day, your teacher would give you a worksheet, or your boss or whoever would give you a worksheet, and they'd say, right, here's the worksheet. If you feel like you need to question it, right? And that's what AI is doing. You've basically said to AI, right, I want this, and AI is going, here, if there's anything wrong with it, come back to me and I'll rejig it. Or you can go to your co-workers and they'll rejig it. So it's all about using AI correctly. I use AI to read stuff out to me. I also use AI to keep me productive. All the rest of it. I also use AI for certain projects, but I mainly get it to describe, and I'll say, no, I did not ask for that. I did not ask for that, But this episode's not about that. This episode is not answering the questions you really wanted. Was what do I think about AI and companies and all the rest of it? Which is what I'll do in another future episode. But I will be talking about AI in this episode. I've already spoke about it, but I want to speak about it again in the end and what my personal thought is. But I'm not going to do too much digging into it. So today's episode is about why I got rid of my web design and development company. And this is one that I have been wanting to do for a long time. This is a question that people have asked me over and over, and they've asked me to do story times, they've asked me to do all kinds of stuff on it. So it is a story time, but I want you to take away something from it. So, yeah. By the way, this is a podcast, so if you want to tidy your room or, do something in the background, please do. Have this on the background, do something in the foreground. This episode should not be in the foreground. And if you've got this when driving, then just listen. Don't look at the screen. Yeah, you've got to say these things, haven't you, on YouTube? Anyway, should have said that in the very, very, very beginning. But anyway, so our so-called story starts with once upon a time, I had a web design company. No. Yes, there was a once upon a time, but when it starts with the end of Arnside Road, and we came here and we realised we had no boundaries. We had nobody breathing down our necks per se, which was a good thing. And we started up a company called MindMob, which is what the channel was originally called. And so MindMob was the company, and we did too many things at the beginning. We did web design, we did graphic design, we did all kinds of crap. We wanted to use technology, and we didn't know what we were doing. Then we were like, right, okay. Then we were Magic Silver Room, and we tried to be a media company, which back then, we didn't know what we were doing. We went in with another media company. That's another story for another day. But basically, that company ended, and we decided, right, well, we're going to be MindMob again. We're going to be web design and web development, and we're going to develop. We're going to make websites. Basically, that's what we're going to do. What we didn't know was how. We knew what websites were, but we didn't know how to create them, and we didn't know what companies wanted. So it's literally like going, well, I'm going to be this company, but I don't know what to do. And to be honest with you, I wanted to learn a whole lot of other things, which I should have done other stuff before that. Anyway, we literally also, we'd bought a new computer. That was one of the mistakes we made. The first mistake we made was to buy this all singing, all dancing machine. It wasn't. Well, it was from the Make It Workshop, and it only costed me 50 quid. Which back then, to buy a computer at 50 quid, even now, that's quite a low price for a machine. That's a ridiculously low price for a machine. You might as well just give someone a computer for that. Anyway, we wanted a computer that we could experiment on, but you've got to remember there's a difference between hardware and software. And now we've got the, I nearly said Ubuntu machine then, we've now got the VTech Genio laptop, which is sat right in front of me, which does literally what we wanted the Ubuntu machine to do. So if I want to do programming, I can. If I want to do web design, I can. I choose not to, but I've done a little bit of web design on this machine. A little bit of, pretend web designer. Here's a website. Is what's going to feel like. I've done a bit of programming on this machine. But that was the first mistake we made. We got the wrong machine. But we didn't know, you see. We had laptops and stuff. I had my Mac laptop, which I was using, still got it. And I had the VTech Challenger, still got that. But we were using things that just weren't, we were using Linux, didn't know anything about Linux. We were using, we were doing stuff that we didn't really know what we were doing with that sort of stuff. And there are websites that, do really well off the back of what we created. But we were getting people coming to us, create this website, we want this, this, and this. And I was like, okay, well, we need to do that. But I couldn't do any of the fun stuff. I had to literally sit down and write all the paperwork. Because if we wanted to be a business, my job was writing all the briefs. Writing all the stuff for the staff and writing all the briefs for all the people. I was writing creative briefs. I was writing job briefs. I was literally writing them and writing them and writing them and writing them. What this person wants, what this person needs. Right, okay, this person needs a blog, so this is going to cost them whatever it's going to cost them. But we lost a lot of money because we didn't know what the hell we were doing in the space of 2 years. And we had a few bumps in the road as well, which I've spoke of in previous episodes. One bump was Neil going into hospital. The second bump was COVID. And the second bump was like the best bump we ever had because it was a real learning curve. But before that, we were taking a lot of stuff that we didn't know. Like I said, we didn't know half the stuff we were doing. The only thing I knew what I was doing was taking phone calls, writing what customers wanted, and saying, right, this is what the customer wants. Can you do it? Yes, no problem. And we got a few websites done and off the ground. But that was done because that I was giving the briefs to people and stuff. And I was saying, right, okay, well, this is what they need. Can we do this? It needs to be in JavaScript. And then someone would turn around and say, well, what's the UI and UX? And I had to go away and research it. And I was like, well, to be honest, it needs to have look and the feel of a store or whatever they needed. And they was like, no, Stephen, we need to actually know what this website's going to do. And all my imaginary colleagues were like, well, we need this, we need that. Oh, well, And then people started whining at me because it was just, nothing was ever good enough. And I was like, well, I've written this thing. This is never good enough. What do you mean it's never good enough? I told you it would have been. So then I'd basically had enough. And I was very frustrated before COVID. Because we got a couple of jobs that required a bit more. There was one job where we had been asked to do a website in Bash scripting. And the program we had at the time turned around to me and said, you do know that Bash scripting is the most difficult thing. I was like, well, I've researched it. I'd literally started the code. And not only was I tearing my hair out, once I'd literally put the code and given him a floppy disk with the code on, he then burnt a disk with all the stuff that he'd done on it. And then also, he'd emailed me stuff saying, this is what Bash scripting, why it doesn't work. And I was like, I could have told you that, but I was like, I really didn't want to do it. But the customer wanted this and they wanted that. And I thought this would work this way. And I was also dabbling with programming because I found some bits fascinating. And I was like, well, if we did this, maybe we could program this and write them that, and maybe they could have a button that did this and that. He turns around and said, well, what's the button going to do? How's it going to work? How much is it going to cost them just to stick a button on the page? I was like, well, I don't know. I said, you're the coder. You work it out. And I was always walking away from it. I was, well, you're the coder. You know. And then when we hit COVID, we were doing a difficult job that we could not finish. There was no way we could finish it because no one was hardly in the office. And there's no... I mean, I remember one time I was on the phone for like... I was on the phone from like 9 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. Just trying to get this... And I was like, well, I can't really... Because I couldn't really see what they were working on. And when I was in the office, I was writing this... I was like, right, well, when I'm next in the office, I'll write this whole thing. I'd wrote them like a 30-page guide, which meant nothing. It was like a 30-page manual on nothing. Well, it was. It was on how we would reprogram a certain thing on this website. It was just a manual on all different things on that website. It ended up being ridiculously long. It was like 85 pages on just how to program one thing. I ended up giving like a 400-page manual. I said, right, well, there's not a manual on this. I said, right, this is a 400-page manual on that. And I said, there's a 400-page manual on that. I said, you just create a manual out of all these crappy manuals that I've made. I spent like, and then the website managed to get finished somehow, but it was like, oh, we were tearing our hair out for months. And then we got another website, which then just became a Facebook page, and they said, oh, we don't want you anymore. And we had another website that became a TikTok channel. So those things were happening. And as that was happening, we had... we then got... By April, we got no work. But then we got work because there was a company that came back to us and said, can you do these databases? Because they'd heard that I could do a database. And I was like, yeah, we've got a spreadsheet program. We'll write these databases. And we wrote a few databases and sold them. And I just turned around to Tom and said, I'm selling the web design company and closing it now. Best time to close it now. I said, well, we've got no customers and it's quiet. Which we did the best thing, but we were doing a few things for people. And then we then decided at the end that we were going to change the company name from Mind Mob to Ball Mackinell Productions, and we sold the Mind Mob name through lockdown. We sold it through a website, I can't remember what it was called now. And people bid for it, and we went in the temperance and we put on a sale and we sold the company. I went away. I went on holiday as lockdown was sort of lifting, easing off a bit. Just a bit. And then we went back into lockdown. And as we went back into lockdown, I had a fresh, brand new company which was doing advertisements. And everybody was shocked. And I said to Tom Mackinell, I said, we can't be an advertisement company that does marketing. We've got to be a marketing company that does advertisements. So that was how the advertisement company began. And we were just a small little company. The first job we ever get, and I'll never forget it, was this water company. They sold water in bottles. They would sell tap water, mountain water. We were advertising it. Tap water in the bottles. There you go. Mountain water. Real water from the mountain. Anyway, that was a company we did. That was our first company. The second company was an accountant's company. And then the third company, after Christmas, was... we did a couple of little jobs. And then our third company I think we did a video game as well. That was the fourth one. But the third company we got was my sister and Nightingale. I was a student or something, and then she turned around and said, "Can you advertise us?" I was like, "No problem." So we did all that advertising, and then we decided that we weren't going to do small companies anymore. We did stuff for Leslie Muir Taylor, but little cafes. We turned around and said, "Well, can you advertise yourself?" Because if you can advertise yourself, that's all good. That's all well and good, because that means that all the hard work that we do just for one little thing, you could actually do. We then took on a few other things, but it took us a bit of a while to get off the ground. We tried a few things as well, which just didn't work. But last year was the beginning of the beginning, because the year before we had moved into a place in Liverpool, and it's bigger than big, and that's where the money is. Now, as a businessman, if you watch The Apprentice by Alan Sugar, I know it's a very watered down and diluted show for anyone in business, but what I like about that show is Alan Sugar is... I know I prefer Clive Sinclair to Alan Sugar any day, but Alan Sugar was... the reason he's successful is because he knows what mistakes he's made. And there are people out there that make mistakes. And the only way you're going to win this competition is if you can see what you're doing. And some people can't. Some people can. Some people are just lame. And it's those ones that it's like, well, yeah, you can get to the top. But it's, And, President Trump. I like some of the speeches he's made about business because, what did he say about you can't afford to fail? You cannot afford to fail. And you cannot. I mean, builders' offices in the early days, when you look at Arnside Road, we was sort of being set up to fail, really. We didn't have much money. We didn't have, the violins are coming out in a second, but, that's why I've not sort of gone back to tell you that story over and over again. But the whole thing is, right, some people don't know they're sitting on, and I didn't know that I was sitting on a gold mine. The only way you know is if you make it. That's the only way you know. And yeah. And I'm going to tell you now something that nobody ever tells anybody. But YouTube is not a gold mine because it's owned by a massive corporation. Like it's the same with other things. And I technically, I think it's too late for people to be digital influencers because the competition now for that is so big, you know, and people always want to be, going digital, you know. Technology is so fast, and it's the thing is, digital jobs are good, but all that digital stuff, they're just tools. You know, even your whole platform is a massive tool because you how do you scream out the window, hold the phone in your hand, and type up the emails? I should have literally put it in a more technical term. How do you put the broom up your ass and clean the floor at the same time? You know, it's it's doable. It's doable. You can do it. You can put a broom up your ass and clean the floor at the same time, only in a metaphorical sense. Um, because the way you do it is you go, right, I've set up a platform, right? It might be TikTok or Shopify or whatever. And then you set your shop there or whatever it may be, or service. And then someone comes along and instead of looking at the competition, they look at you. And instead of you looking at the competition, you go, right. You look at the competition later on when someone else is up the road charging whatever it may be. The best one is here's one for you. Um, there are a lot of micropubs in this area that I live in now. I choose micropubs, but none of them have that personal touch like the tap and bottles. The tap and bottles to me is like a little Rover's Return. Really, there's something like we know. There's stories behind that door, but in the business way, they're always telling stories. They're always, very. I like the Facebook posts, and I've looked at a lot of them thinking, you know, it's the way they write the Facebook posts. It's the way they bring the people through the door. You know, um, and it's you know, and the thing is with these micro pubs, some of them are very friendly. We get on with them. There's a community spirit. Some of them they try the community spirit, but it doesn't work for them. Do you see what I'm saying? And it's just you'll get that sense when you walk through the door. Um, you know, a lot of these micro pubs are trying to be what these big pubs are doing. Doesn't work for them. A lot of these independent companies are playing the same game, which I'm not saying don't, but if you do it, you have to look at. The thing is, you have to to get some influence from somewhere. You have to sort of go, right. Okay, well, I took this idea from, you know, this big pub that I went to, and they were doing this or whatever. You know, and I mean, businesses don't want to be quirky anymore because they realise that being quirky, being something different, just doesn't sell. But it can do. Um, you know, and I mean, it's like there are a lot of shops that do they do stuff on TikTok, but they do it in a very different way. You know, and not just shops, but um, you know, you look at what people do on TikTok, and you're thinking, that's boring, that's boring, that's boring. That's all. That's awesome. Do you know? And it's like the awesome stuff is what people will go to, and they'll buy from that. You see. So anyway, I mean, what we do as an advertisement company, um, I'm not going to speak about the building company, and I've given you the bones of that, but I've mostly spoke about the web design company. Um, and the thing is as well, like we'd learned of marketing, we learned how to build businesses and stuff, but we like to spread awareness. And that's what advertising does. You're spreading awareness. And it's so easy to do. But you have to see where the market is. Now, music ads, like they're very easy to do. But the way we work now is we see how the old adverts were written. Because you think, right, okay, well, you know, consumers, how are you going to get them to buy this item? Well, you go on, watch, say, an old ad, and you're thinking, right, like music ads now, they put the headliners right at the bottom. You know, say for example, say if now I know they were doing it like a few years ago, but headliners to me shouldn't be at the bottom. They should be like, for example, if say Swedish House Mafia were playing at a festival tomorrow, and you saw Swedish House Mafia at the bottom, you probably wouldn't think about them. And that's the psychological way. They'd rather go, right, okay, well, these are the headliners. These are the people that support him. Doesn't matter what type of gig it is. When we did Sound City, now, Sound City, when I see that advertised all the time, I'll look at the ads, I'm thinking, the headline is all the way down the bottom. Still. I can understand if they're on the second stage, because no one really cares about the second stage, or if they're on the last day sometimes. Usually, you know, if they're on, so if you've got the Friday and the Saturday and the Sunday, and the headliners on the Sunday they might not do as well because it's the last day. It's the last day of the festival. People want to go home probably, or they'll stay because they know that headline is playing. And that's just the nature of festivals, gigs, whatever. But if you put them at the top, even for that day, if you just take that whole day out of the equation, if you were to put, say, for example, White Stripes and Queens of the Stone Age, even if like White Stripes was to play on the Sunday and Queens of the Stone Age were to play on the Friday, people would go on the Friday to see Queens of the Stone Age, and then they'd probably go and on the Sunday to see White Stripes. You know, that's just an example. But they're the things that you look at and go, oh yeah, that's brilliant. But you see two bands like that up at the top. They're the bands, because you're thinking when you go to a festival, you're paying money to go see a band. And the reason why they put headliners towards the bottom is because of this doom scrolling age that we're in. You don't put something at the top because you want people to scroll through it. Scroll to the bottom. That's where it might be. Well, yes. In this day and age, doom scrolling, all well and good. But even today, I think if people doom scroll and they see a headliner at the top, they're gonna go. They're gonna want to go straight off the bat. If your favourite band, let's say Taylor Swift, if she's down at the bottom, she ain't gonna get. People aren't gonna want to watch. They're not gonna. They're not gonna want to go see Taylor Swift because she's right at the bottom of the. It's just it's a psychological thing. You it's like you look at stuff, and people think too sort of clickbaity, too, oh, Taylor Swift's down at the bottom, someone will see it. No, they won't. Just a fact. It's just a fact. You know? Even kids of today, if you put something they like down at the very bottom, they're not going to know. You know? It's like hiding your favorite thing, your favorite food in the bottom of the whatever it is. And and that's what people think. Oh well, in this brain rot society, nobody's gonna want to do anything or go anywhere because that ad's not appealing to them. And the only way they'll sell out is if the headliners are done the way they're done. And they need to scream at people. These things, your main. I'm always asking people, who've you got on your lineup? Who's your main act? That's what I ask. And they turn around to me and say, what do you mean by the main act? Right, who've you got on the headline? Who's your main person? Who do you think people will want to see? And they don't tell me, so I go and research it. And I'm like, right, okay, why is that person there? Why is Armand Van Helden right at the very bottom? I think it was Armand Van Helden. Yeah, Armand Van Helden. Why is it at the very bottom? This guy should be at the very top. Guess what? When I did that, when I put Armand Van Helden at the top, they put it at the very bottom. I put it at the top. Because that's who I would want to see. So I put the acts that I'd want to see right towards the top. And then the acts that I think that people didn't really care about so much, I put towards the bottom. Do you know what? They went and saw every act that I'd put on the ad. They were on the bill wasn't any different. I just rejigged it. I just put, right, okay, well, Armand Van Helden, definitely, you want to go see him. There was somebody else I think I put next to Armand Van Helden because I thought, well, they're on the following day. They're not on that day. People want to go see them. This artist is new, not heard of. So I put her towards the bottom. Do you know what? People went and saw every act that was on it. Because, yeah, that's good. But, I mean, even the stuff that isn't so good that you think, I might check them out, you still put them towards the bottom because, but your headliners, you always put them at the top. Because people are paying precious money to go and see a festival still. They're paying precious money to go see a festival. So if you're putting your headlines down towards the bottom, like Rage Against the whatever, say it's Rage Against the Machine, and if I was advertising a gig that had like Rage Against the Machine and Limp Bizkit, both go on the top. You might not care about either of those bands, but someone will care about both those bands or one of those bands, or but you put them both. Or if it's Ozzy Osbourne and Marilyn Manson, well, they're going towards the top because, I mean, like, people would want to go see Ozzy. These are just prime examples. People want to go and see those bands because they're paying precious, precious money. to go see a festival. You pay a lot of money to go, and anything, you know. And they still do it with the wrestling. You know, when they do the wrestling events, they always put the big wrestlers on the top. And I'm thinking they're still doing that with the wrestling. Why aren't they doing it with other events? It really baffles me, you know. So yeah, it just baffles me. And I tell people this. I say, well, when you do it, I says, the reason we do it, we tell people how we do it, so they've got a rough idea. Because why? What I can't get is, you know, if you're going to see something, the act should be right at the top, not down the bottom. I understand there are certain festivals that will do it because they want to promote differently, but still, it doesn't matter if you're promoting differently or not. I think it should be towards the top. You know, because when I used to listen to the Metal Hammer podcast, and they'd be talking like Sonosphere and Download and all that, they would never ever talk about they'd never talk about the second stage. They'd talk about it, but not in the way they're always selling that fest as if you want to go to it. So you're never gonna hear things like a second stage band, like, even if they're on the second stage, they will be towards the top, because you might want to go see. I'm trying to think what it was on the second stage. But yeah, there was. I mean, with Download was a prime example. They had who did they have on the main stage one year? Well, they had Ozzy, they had Avenged Sevenfold, they had Marilyn Manson, they had all these big people on the main stage. I think did Biscuit play? I can't remember, but I talk to people about Download, and people still want to go to Download. In fact, Download haven't changed the way they've advertised. People still talk about Download as if it's like a mecca. So I think if Download was to change the way they advertised, I think people would be like, hold on a minute. What? I mean, they did that with which festival was it? It was a metal festival, and they changed the layout. The festival goers went absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts. Because you're paying money. At the end of the day, you're paying money. You want to go see that band or artist. And I'm coming from a personal point here. You know, as somebody who listens to not as much music as I used to, mainly, but, you know, most of the metal stuff. And it's like, why would you change it? You know? And the reason, I mean, wrestling, again, you pay a lot of money to go wrestling tickets. Some of them are ridiculously priced. You know, especially like WWE tickets. There's a whole like thing with that. But anyway, so I've got to mention AI, even though I said I wasn't going to mention it. I was going to give you a little few thoughts on it. My thoughts on AI is, like, I've been using it personally to draft emails, draft notes, be more productive, add dates that, you know, my calendar. So I know then, oh yeah, I need to put that on the board. Oh yeah, I've got this list too. And I always rejig it because I'm like, you know, that should have been at the top and it isn't. So that's my thoughts. And I'm trying to build a checkout page which is going to be very accessible to my customers, because they're the ones that matter. You know, you guys always matter all the time. You know you are, and you're always coming to me. You know, oh, I've got a problem. Why don't you fix it? You know, and In a few months, we've got a podcast studio we're opening. I'm not personally opening it. I've designed, would you believe, I've designed this podcast studio, this all singing, all dancing podcast studio. We've decided to put egg boxes on the wall, not to treat the sound, but to give it that look of a podcast studio because people want it. We've got tiles on the wall as well. The egg boxes are more for a look, not a feel. And, you know, we've got bass traps and all the rest of it. With a podcast studio, though, what we've said is we've listened to a lot of people and we've said, well, the podcast needs a bit of reverb. So there's a bit of that, bit of everything else. But there's a couch in there. There's all kinds of stuff. And it's the same podcast studio as it's always been. We've just rejigged it. We've just redesigned it. And we've listened to those people that are going to do it. I think one of our customers is a YouTuber, I think. She is. Yeah, she's a YouTuber and she wants to use this new podcasting suite. So she's using it. And there's two guys from Bootle that want to start a podcast. So they're doing that and we're saying, yeah, do you know what? We'll give you a whole entire studio where you can have your podcast. And in there's all the basic stuff. There's a little mixing desk. It's a cheap one we've put in there just for people to use. Nothing too expensive. And we've got a couple of speakers that people might want to use. As for microphones, we do have in storage personally if people want to use them. They're not great, but they're basically the short SM57 microphones. Sorry, not SM57s, SM58s. And there is an SM57, but it's not ours. Doesn't belong to us. So yeah, and I know people want like fancy condenser mics, but we were like, well, if people want to use microphones, whatever, there it is. And I think we're getting cameras soon, so it's for people to use, but it's more or less for people who, there's Wi-Fi in there, so you can do live streaming if you want. There's all that stuff, but it's in a few months. So the podcast studio is being designed, and I think it's been redeveloped, reimagined. And yeah, a lot of money's gone into the studio. Obviously not from us. All we're doing is designing it and opening it, and then you guys go use it. And another thing as well, people have been asking for a jingles package, which we've said, well, we've had this podcast studio instead of the jingles package. So we're doing a jingles package later on this year. We've got someone that's already done some jingles for us already, and they're already in the mail to those people. We're doing audio ads this year as well, brand new audio ads. So, we're doing these audio ads, all singing, all dancing. We're also doing podcast ads now. So basically, like what I'm doing here now, sitting and talking, I'm now actually doing a podcast about each service, about what they do. I'm literally recording. They do the podcast, they distribute it, and they put it out on their platform. But we record it for them. So we record a whole podcast on their item. We're doing one for. We are doing one for. I think it's New Directions, because they asked for us to do one for them. So we're doing one for them. In this format, in this style, and it's just a podcast about their service. They're usually what I think they're like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, something like that. Crumbs. But again, if people want like an hour podcast, 1 to 2 hours, 3 hours, you do a podcast on how long you want someone to talk on something. We also did a podcast for outreach services, and we're just doing a podcast on what they do. We're doing a podcast for a children's service on safeguarding. We're doing a podcast on what their services offer. So yeah, a lot of NHS stuff really. A lot of stuff that that technically we don't want to do, but sorry, personally, we're just doing it because we think that's people will listen to a podcast instead of reading a leaflet. We've got a podcast for the elderly as well. We got one that's we've got ones for the elderly. I'm recording a podcast on I think, is it called Safer Life or something podcast, and it's just about like keeping warm, making sure you're eating warm food and all the rest of that, and then we're doing all the rest of it and stuff. And then we're doing the men's health podcast, which is about they're all different ones, but there's one that we're doing on what is it? Yeah, men's stuff. Prostate cancer. We're doing a prostate cancer podcast, and again, it's all we're doing podcasts for different people. We're doing a podcast for someone on. There's a guy he was a guitar teacher for me for a while, but he's now put together a package for blind people that want to learn guitar. He's done it, and so I'm doing a podcast for him. I'm not going to do an interview with him because I thought I'd just talk about it on my show and obviously talk about his stuff. And then I'm also doing another podcast about his services and what he's got in his thing. So I'm doing that for him, and he wants it. So what I'm doing there is I'm doing a podcast for him, and then he's going to put stuff over the top of it. So if he wants to play guitar or do whatever he wants, he can do that. But he's asked me to do the podcast, so yeah. And there's other people who've asked me to do the podcast. I've got a couple of synth companies to do podcasts for. I've got a couple of audio companies to do podcasts for. So yeah, I'm doing podcasts for anyone who wants a podcast, basically. If someone calls me up and says, hey Stephen, radio advertisement, I believe you're doing recording, could you do a podcast on X, Y and Z? So yeah, we'll do a podcast on it. And it's literally, it's literally, we've got a service now which is about 50 quid. And in that 50 quid you get a script, you get a voice, and you also get the other bits and pieces that come with it too. So yeah, and the podcasts, they take time to develop, which not pay for the time, but you're paying for the scripting time, the editing time, the time it does the podcast. Not time for me to record the podcast, but the time it do the process. That's what you're paying for. So that's what you're paying for when you get a podcast. You pay for the process, not the time. But yeah, and another thing that we're doing, last and not least, another thing that we've just brought out, we've done a whole podcasting course on how you could be doing a podcast, how you can sit down, talk into the microphone, be confident. It starts with being confident. You start being confident with a microphone. Get a dictaphone out, get a voice recorder out, get your phone out, start recording and listening to yourself back. It could be anything. You could be talking about the weather, you could be talking about your day, anything that you're interested and passionate about. Talk about it, then listen to it back and get familiar with listening to your voice, because a lot of people that aren't confident are the ones that can't deal with hearing their voice back. And also, a lot of other people will be not confident because they're, but I still have that same thing with everybody, no matter who you are. You've got to get confident. And another thing that I'm saying to people, because I was taught this in hospital radio, when you press that record button, that's when you're going out. Okay, your podcast won't go out as soon as you press the record button. It doesn't go to any magical website. But basically, when you press the record, as they do in dummy shows and hospital radio, you are live. So you're live basically to the world. That big red button, as soon as you press it, you are live to the world. The mic is open, and it's a bit like live streaming in a way. You have to get used to doing that. The next thing you've got to be familiar with is copyright. Ooh, it's a big one. What music to use and not use. Because everyone wants to use their favourite band, and then as soon as they do that, they then put it onto the podcast service, and the next thing, their podcast gets taken down. This podcast that they've put probably a whole lot of time, you probably put a lot of time into your podcast. So we do a lot of that in the course. And then the last thing we finish with is you doing a podcast and putting it on somewhere like Buzzsprout or somewhere like that to finish with. So we cover all these things. We cover a lot of stuff. It's a small course. It's, I think it's a 6-week course that we do. Interviewing people, going out and interviewing people, interview techniques, how to hold the mic, all that sort of stuff. What gear to use, what gear to get, what gear it'll cost, and all the rest of it. And personally, the best gear you can have or get is think of what you have. You might have a cheap mic that you've not used for years and years. It might be lying around in your cupboard. That'll sound alright, to begin with. Headsets, having a headset that's comfortable, all that. So that's all in the course, and it's coming pretty soon. So I've done it all for you guys. And there's also a PDF which will soon be free. And a PDF which will soon be. I issued it before on the website, but it wasn't really user friendly. It wasn't very readable, but this one will. And there is also a podcast course on well, we tried running it on Instagram, but I don't think it ran very well, so we're going to rerun it again. So there you go, that's literally what we've done. And, yeah. And before you go, I want to just say I've changed a few things on this channel. I've put out a fair bit with various bits and pieces. I've gone back to doing serious stuff. I'm live streaming stuff. I've even gone back to doing tutorials and stuff on this channel, as well as doing the vlogs week in, week out. So I think the podcast is helping this channel survive too. Anyway, that's it. Next episode, I will talk about the building company, and I'll talk about how to build an empire and all the rest of it. But I hope this has really helped those people, and I haven't held back.